Hello and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And myself, Stephen George. Good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 29th of March, 2015. And you know what? This week has been a week of prophecies. I've had loads of information. I've been looking at loads of videos all about certain things going on. So that's something that we're going to deal with in the near future. So we will get back to that. It's a guest that we're going to try and get on to talk about one or two things. So we will get back to that in the next few weeks. But our guest on tonight is a guest called John Flaherty. Flaherty. Okay. Just get that right, put my teeth in. Our guest on tonight is John Flaherty, and we're going to be talking about addiction, but we're going to be talking about other subjects as well, NLP being one of them, and John is an ex-priest as well, so we're going to be kind of talking about his background in the priesthood and why he left and stuff like that. Now, before we get John on, obviously we have a couple of things to say, and we need to find out about the communication channels.
Yes, we do. So, Mary, communication channels, please.
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Thank you, Mary. 046 927 1212 is the magic number for the studio this evening and every evening. We also have on the website, which is oymradio.com, we have the link to the Facebook channel. That is the anti-social media. We have that as well. We have the YouTube link there. We have the link for the the tune-in radio for people who may be listening on iPhones or smartphones or tablets or mobile devices. I should just say mobile devices. That will cover everything. So the tune-in radio link is there. What else have we got for you? We have the chat room as well. You can pop questions in there on the chat room for our guest this evening, as Alan mentioned, which is John Flaherty. We also are monitoring the chat room as well on People's Internet Radio for questions as well. So, big hi to everyone in both of the chat rooms. Enjoy the show. Alan.
Cheers, Steve. Okay, as usual, just a few things to go through. Seems to be an awful lot. As the weeks go in, more and more weeks, more and more information is coming in all the time about all kinds of stuff. And our script is getting longer and longer. I think it's about 4 pages tonight.
4 pages? Wow.
I'll have to getting to be like a manuscript. So we'll get through the things because we have to get our guest on. So we'll go through a few things anyway, because there are certain things that have to be mentioned, as you know, and we have to get it out there in the general public. Now, the first one on the list, I don't know whether you've seen it during the week. I'm just baffled by this. It was on MSN.com. And it says here, the survivors of institutional abuse have expressed outrage over government plans to seal all major industrial, school and orphanage investigation records for 75 years. The move, which also allows for the possible destruction of documents, must now be ratified by the Dáil in a bill which will be brought forward by Education Minister Jan O'Sullivan. The Irish Independent has learned that the bill has been approved by Cabinet for drafting. The Retention of Records Bill 2015 will provide for the strict and confidential sealing of documents from the Commission into Child Abuse, the Residential Institutes Redress Board and the Residential Institutes Review Committee. Tom Cronin of Irish Survivors of Institutional Abuse International said abuse survivors were shocked and horrified that the records would be sealed for so long. He said, "I can understand that these documents are sensitive and that they might need to be sealed for a period of years." So basically, I can't believe that. I'm finding it hard to believe who is deciding to seal these documents. What politicians are saying we have to seal these documents and not let people see them? What are they covering up? Are these people still alive at the moment? Is that what they're covering up? Or are they covering up something bigger, that there's other people involved with this and names will be mentioned?
Well, as we always say, and we have said from time to time, and we do always say actually, that when something like this happens, you kind of have to look, outside the box and go, well, who's going to benefit from this? I mean, the people who are abused, they certainly won't benefit.
No.
So obviously, as you say, there must be maybe a trail going back, and if this trail was to be followed, maybe it might be embarrassing for certain individuals.
Yeah, definitely.
I.e. politicians.
Now, we do know that what they try and do, the powers to be, what they try and do is stitch people up, which a few people have been stitched up in the past. One of them, as you know, was Luke Radosky from We Are Change, where they actually sent him an email pretending that it was inside photos of the Blinderberg meeting, and it turned out to be paedophile images. Lucky enough, Luke didn't open up on his laptop, but there was a kind of preview option of the images on his friend's laptop, and the whole idea was that if Luke opened up on his laptop and then he went through customs in America, they would opened up his laptop, checked it, and said these images were on your laptop, and then that would have went out into the media. That's what they do. That's one of the methods they do. So we know they use that kind of facility or system to try and ensnare or catch people in the alternative media, and that's been used a few times. But as to why they would go and start covering up the people who are in government, even if they have nothing got to do with it, why would they be covering up information like this? Surely we have to get this out to the public. It's a bit worrying when that happens, even this time.
Yeah, as Dr. Rock just posted there on the People's Internet Radio chat room, and I totally agree, he said the more those documents need to be sealed, the more we need to see them. Yeah,
I totally agree, Dr. Rock. They need to be released. And I'd like to know who are the politicians that are saying they should be sealed. And I'd love to go up to them and say, what are you hiding? Why are they to be sealed? What are you hiding? All these people have been abused for years. They need to have an answer to what went on and who was doing it and everything else. Why are they being sealed? That's my question. Steve?
Yeah, sorry. I was just finishing off a message there. Well, we're just going to talk briefly about the A&E departments. Still, it's mental what's going on in the A&E departments here in Ireland. People are still have long waiting times. They're still on trolleys in corridors. There's still no beds available. Even people that have medical cover are finding that they have to wait as well. It's an absolute disgrace. And there's more of these horror stories. They're kind of unfolding on a daily basis. Not all make it to mainstream media, but they are coming out. And anyone who has had the misfortune of having to bring a child or a loved one to a casualty department over the past couple of months, you see it, you know it all too well. You don't have to take our word for it. You can see it yourself. And I think when this happened before, recently, when Mr. Varadkar, Leo Varadkar, was on his jolly holidays, he said something needed to be done. He was going to sort this out. Well, I believe he's back from his holidays now, and nothing has changed. So Leo, you're going to have to get your finger out of wherever you have it.
And do something about it.
Absolutely.
Right, over to Utah. Now, Russia today announced that Utah becomes only state in America to approve death by firing squad. So the state of Utah has agreed that they have death by firing squad. It says Utah Governor Gary Herbert has signed a law authorizing the use of firing squads to carry out death penalty sentences if officials cannot acquire lethal injection drugs, making the state the only one in America to approve of the method. Now, what I can't understand is they're saying they're having major problems with the lethal injection drugs. So what are they using in Switzerland for euthanasia, and why can't they use the same drug that they use over there? I don't know. I'm just, putting it out there. But death by firing squad, talk about go back in time.
It just sounds better, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It does, yeah.
How would you like to die? Firing squad or lethal injection?
Yeah. It's kind of like Deal and No Deal.
Yeah.
In the box. Right, what's next, Steve?
Right, next on the list is OYM stickers or T-shirts. If you have one, we'd like to see a picture of you wearing it in some exotic place, and, viewer discretion is advised. If you have an OYM car sticker or a bumper sticker or a T-shirt, or even if you just print out the logo off the website, we're just kind of doing a little experiment to see how far and wide we can get this OYM logo. It's a little bit of publicity, I suppose, a little bit of PR on our behalf. So if you have a sticker, a print out from the website, or a T-shirt, put on your T-shirt and go somewhere exotic, like on your holidays and, I don't know, anywhere at all. Just take a picture, and we're going to stick it up in the gallery. We have a little gallery there, and we just want to, it's just a little bit of fun. So, if you do have a T-shirt or a sticker, all you need is a camera. If you don't have a T-shirt and you don't have a sticker, well, there's a little shop section on the website there you can pop in. You can buy a T-shirt. They're available in all shapes and sizes, guaranteed to get you noticed, that's all I will say. And we have the stickers as well, $5 for a $5. So what else? You wouldn't get anything else for a $5.
We are out of medium-sized T-shirts, but we do have large and extra large.
Yes, for the real men.
Excellent. Right, we got an email in from Katie via Facebook, and on rta.ie on the website. It does mention a Supreme Court judgment may make it more difficult for Bank of Scotland Ireland to take possession of family homes which are in mortgage arrears. It has emerged. In her judgment, issued last week, Miss Justice Lafoy, we've heard that name before, Ben dealing with Judge Lafoy, said it had the potential to be of significant importance for people with mortgages taken out with the bank. At the end of 2010, Bank of Scotland Ireland was merged with its British parent Bank of Scotland using a European law merger procedure. The Irish company ceased to exist as it pulled out of Irish banking, the market, So, yeah, so there must be something in the old Bank of Scotland. If you have a mortgage with them, there might be a way to circumvent the mortgage, or, from, the whole kind of securitisation thing with the banks. Steve, how's your week?
Yes, it's my week's been fine, not as bad or as good, depending on what way you look at it, as Chris's week. Chris just said that he has an OYM t-shirt, and he needs a stick to beat the grannies away. Well, funny enough, we're selling sticks as well to beat those grannies away.
OYM sticks.
OYM sticks, and we don't advocate beating grannies. Just put that in there as well. Yeah, okay. What's on the agenda? What's on my week for this week? Just a couple of things, really. Just this thing that's been happening during the week with the plane that went down. Yeah. The Germanwings plane. From the time it happened, Sky News. I don't watch it. Okay, I don't watch Sky News because it's NLP. That's what it is. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. They play it and play it and play it. They play it to death. So by the time you've reached the end of your day, you believe whatever the hell they've told you to believe. Most people do anyway. And there's a few people I've met during the week, and it's one of the subjects that's on people's lips. There's another kind of thing that was going on in Ireland where a man killed a woman, and he done all sorts of things to her. Excuse me. He slept with a knife, and a lot of people are watching that case. I believe he's been locked up now. Don't know how long he got, but he's got a custodial sentence. People were watching that, but you were also kind of thrown between that and the Germanwings plane incident. So I was just discussing it in work during the week, and of course, when stuff like this happens, as I say, Sky News jump on it. They do it to death, and normally I will get a couple of people in where I work, and during the lunch break, they will shooting the breeze, and they were talking about this, and one of them looked at me and says, so what's the conspiracy theory side of it? And I was kind of taken aback. I said, geez, I don't know. I'll be honest, I haven't really been following it. I've been kind of looking elsewhere at other things. Although, if it did happen, it's an atrocity. It's terrible. I'm not saying it didn't. But, it's terrible. But I've kind of seen some information on the internet during the week that says if that were to happen, as it's described, that seemingly that a technical manual based for that particular Airbus was released onto the internet during the week, just to let people know that on that particular craft, there is another way of getting in. If the guy couldn't have got in through the normal means, knocking on the door, and he said there's a keypad, and this keypad, he enters in a code that's only known, it's pre-programmed, blah blah blah. It's to stop terrorism and hijackers, but the crew would know about it. And once he put that code in, then he would have access. He'd be able to open the door. Now, okay, what was behind the door? Was it jammed with something else? We don't know. But it kind of stinks to high heaven that even what I kind of seen. Like I said, the chap I spoke to in work, he said, oh, you have to see this on Sky News. So he fired up Sky News on the web. We're looking at this picture. It could have been anything, and I didn't see any plane parts. I didn't expect to see bodies, but I didn't see anything that looked like it could be off a plane, like a huge chunk of metal. But he said, oh, it's because it's so far away, but you can see people on the ground walking around, and like when you compare the size of a human body to the debris that was on the ground, it didn't match up in my mind. If that was debris from the plane, then maybe the whole thing exploded long before it hit the ground. I don't know. I don't claim to know. It's just, little questions like that were kind of popping up. Will we ever find out what happened in the end? I don't know, but the newspapers have been quick enough to jump on it as well. And I was in a garage there getting petrol a couple of days back, and there's a tabloid newspaper and the picture of the co-pilot, and all of a sudden he now has a mental disorder.
Yeah.
You know, he's mentally ill. You know, so that label is hung on the guy. He's been tried. I think he's been tried and convicted in the tabloids.
Oh, the other one is that he converted to Muslim a few weeks beforehand or something
Really?
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, look again. The tabloids will do that to death. He'll be tried and convicted, you know, in the printed media, but he's not here to defend himself. So, you know, so what else can you do?
Nothing got to do with CERN powering up at the same time. They didn't mention that in the press.
No,
I
didn't.
The Hadron Collider powering up at the same time.
No.
Yeah, that's quite convenient that they didn't mention that as well. You know, if we're going down the kind of conspiratorial route,
yes.
So let's see. He changed his religion a few weeks to Muslim. He had a mental disorder, and CERN actually powered up at the same time. Take your pick.
Yeah, you don't know what to believe, but I certainly wouldn't be getting. I wouldn't be getting excited by what we're seeing on Sky News, and I said it to one of the chaps in work. I said, that footage you're showing me, that could be anything. Here we go. I said, no, seriously. If I was to tell you, or if Sky News was to tell you this was an incident that happened in Outer Mongolia, I said, you've no way of knowing.
Yeah, exactly.
You haven't.
No way.
And he looked at me and said, you've got a point there, but they're hardly going to lie about it. And I was, right, okay,
Yeah.
we'll move on.
Move on.
But yeah, what else? The flat earth. After I left here last week, I went home and I was just on the internet before I went to bed, intending to jump on, just check out a couple of emails and retire for the evening. But that wasn't to be. I found some information in relation to the flat earth. Now, people might go, oh, here we go, he's talking about the earth being flat. Well, hold on a second. Hold on. Up to the 15th century, we thought it was. And then whatever happened after that, all of a sudden it was round. But I found some video information, and I'd urge people to just have a look at it, just for the crack, for the hell of it, right? And it's a chap called Mark Sargent, and Mark Sargent has done some homework, and he's put a series of kind of information videos. They're very easy to digest. It's all in plain English, and it's on his YouTube channel. So if you just type in Mark Sargent Flat Earth, you'll get it. You'll be brought along to the channel. You can have a look. Have a look at the very first video, the introductory video. And I guarantee you'll be kind of inspired to watch the second one. And then once you watch the second one, you won't be able to stop, because the information and the questions that he's putting out there, it's amazing, because a lot of them cannot be answered. You know, and I even said, I'm not going to say too much about it, but I even said it to my wife. I mentioned one of the questions that was, posed in the video, and the whole day went by, and then later on that evening she said to me, hang on a second, that's still going through my mind with that question you asked me earlier, and it makes no sense, and so she's thinking about it. So that's kind of
Are you going to throw the question out there?
Well, if you like, down the bottom, he says the question, down the bottom of the South Pole, near the Antarctic, down that kind of direction, he says you have South America and you have Australia. So you look at them on the flat Earth, on a flat atlas or whatever, they are miles apart. I mean, you couldn't get any further. But on the globe, they're kind of close enough together. But he says you try and get a direct flight from South America to Australia, or Australia to South America, it can't be done. It's impossible. They always have to kind of go up and then back down. It won't be direct. But it's something like that. When you kind of see it on the screen and you hear the question and you look at the visual image, you kind of go, it makes kind of sense, and okay, that's just one of the questions.
Well, let's put it out there. If anybody knows if there's a flight from South America straight to Australia, if that's possible, let us know.
Yeah,
we'd be curious on that.
Okay, and the last thing, this is something I just seen on Facebook. Not that I use Facebook. Well, actually, I do. And I just kind of repost a lot of information. I see information, I share information. I've lost a lot of friends actually on Facebook with people who I would have befriended, people I would have went to school and all that, and some family members, extended family members, who are now, they're gone off my page, and I can only assume it's because of a lot of the stuff that I share. and I put up, because, you know, to the uninitiated, it makes me look like a blithering idiot. But anyway.
To the closed-minded people.
To the closed-minded people, yes. But I did see something there today, and it purports to be real. I don't know if it is. I think you shared it as well. It's the recent pics on the net of the giant skeleton. Now, we've seen this before.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I think the last one, we found out that it was a Photoshop challenge or some challenge anyway.
Lloyd Pye said that, yeah.
Yeah. But these ones now, do you reckon, is it the same? Is it similar? Is it fake?
I don't know. We'd have to see them. We'd have to see them. We'd have to see people lifting them up and showing them on video. Rather than a photo.
But even at that, you know.
Well, you know. See, this is the trouble. You know, John Irwin said to us, and time again, we say this. When you put the truth into a barrel full of lies, it's very hard to find it. And they give us so many mixed truths and lies, we don't know what's what. That's how it works. Exactly. So we end up wanting to see it ourselves, which is fair enough, you know. Right.
There's my week anyway. Done and dusted. Okay. How was your week?
Well, okay, just a couple of things before we get John on. I was looking at a video during the week from Integrity Ireland, and basically they didn't allow the general public into court. Basically, they had a court case. There was people in the court, and there was a guy demanding information from the registrar, the judge, and the judge got up, walked out, and they reconvened, but in a different court, and they put police on the door and said, if you don't have a case going on, you're not allowed in, which is not allowed because there's a public gallery there. And I mean, that's just so ignorant. I mean, this is why 6 months in Templemore and the Gardai come out and they think they're Stephen Hawkins. Honest to God, they really do. Now, we're going to be talking to John shortly about NLP programming, because I do believe that NLP is being used in Templemore. It has to be. Somebody to go in, I've been told myself personally that people that have known people who have been recruited to the Gardai go through 6 months of training, come out, and are a different person. So NLP must be used somewhere along the line. I'm convinced of that, but we'll talk to John shortly about that. But the attitude of the Gardai in this video, it's on YouTube, Integrity Ireland, check it out. They shouldn't be wearing uniforms. It's just completely disgraceful. Really, really disgraceful. Now, I had a little bit of, I won't say an argument, a bit of a debate regarding vegetarians versus carnivores. Now, I'm a carnivore, or an omnivore, because I eat most things, and Steve is a vegetarian.
Oh, hang on, we didn't have a debate.
No, I'm making a point here. And in all the time I've known Steve, he never ever has once turned around and said anything about me eating meat, right? And I have never once turned around, I don't think so, Steve, and said to him about he should be eating meat.
No, never.
Right? We've never, you know. And but it just seems to be, I had this kind of debate with a lady on Facebook, and it just seems to be that the vegetarian side, there are vegetarians, not all of them, obviously not all of them, but there's some vegetarians who feel impulsed to dictate or tell people who eat meat they shouldn't be eating meat. Now, I would never go around and say to anybody what they should be eating, really. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, that's up to them. That's really up to them. But it seems to be that it's more... Now, I don't know about this, Steve. I'm not having a go, but it seems to me that there's more vegetarians dictating to people what they should be eating, and very few carnivores doing the opposite.
Well, I would tend to disagree there ever so slightly, because all you have to do is turn on mainstream TV and watch the adverts, and a lot of the adverts will be, you know, come down to so-and-so supermarket and get your choice cuts and your this, that, and the other. So there is a lot of NLP going on.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
no, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people actually, like somebody turning around to you and saying, you should be eating meat, you shouldn't be a vegetarian.
Well, outside of mainstream pushing it, telling me that, you know, I should. No, other than that, no one has ever come up to me and tried to lecture me, because, well, first of all, I would just walk away anyway. I wouldn't stand there and be lectured. Yeah. But no one has actually come up to me, no.
Yeah. Just so each to their own, you know. I mean, let people do what they do, you know. That's kind of my approach.
But if you just, my learned colleague, if you just backtrack there to last week.
Here we go. Okay.
Our learned guest last week, he did say on the scale that, you know, all these creatures and things that have souls, he says. Yeah. He did say, he said we're number 5, then he changed it, said we were number 4, animals were number 3. You know, so we're all collective consciousness. So, I mean, would you eat a baby? You know, let's...
Don't even go there. I have stuff that I could talk about without that.
No.
So don't even go there.
No. Before the watershed, let's not do that.
Yeah, okay. Right, next thing, before we get John on. Now, UK Column reported there was a pilot scheme rolled out in Manchester where you plead guilty online and is going to be rolled out nationwide. So if you get done for speeding or parking ticket, right, you go and click guilty online and pay the fine to save court costs.
Is that a joke?
No, that's serious. It was reported in UK Column, Brian and the guys, Brian, Mike and the rest of the team there, and it was trialled in Manchester and it's going to be rolled out nationwide. So you can probably guarantee that, you know the way you can do your tax online now for your car?
Yeah.
Right, well, it'll probably be the same with, you know, you've been caught speeding, go online, pay the fee, and it saves all them hassle of going to court.
No, we can't be having that.
No, okay. Now, on a very quick, one more thing.
Sorry, because if that was to come in here, and generally whatever happens in the UK it gets done over here, and quite badly too, then that leaves kind of no real room for the like the official, not the official offer, but you know, the return to sender, because it's that could be messy.
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah. We'd like to find out more about that. We probably have to speak to the UK Column to find out more about that. And the one thing that's left before we get John on is I did a little survey on Facebook, and I just put the question up and said, if RTE was pay-per-view, would you pay? And everyone who answered said no.
And just out of curiosity, how many people, roughly?
Roughly about 20 or so people just said no. And there was a few other comments as well, which I won't go into.
Yeah, I've seen some of the comments, yeah.
And not you know, things like, not if someone even paid for me, I wouldn't go and watch RTE. So there you go. Okay, let's bring a guest on. Now, John is an expert in addiction, but Steve's going to give us a rundown on his background.
Yes, I am. I'll start that again. After 6 years studying theology, philosophy, scripture and ethics, John served for 11 years as a Catholic priest. He then left the ministry and furthered his studies in theology and public media, gaining a BA honours degree from Leeds University, England in 1996. In the same year, John was appointed Client Services Manager for the care of those presenting with HIV/AIDS. And then in 1998, John and Anne Louise relocated to Ireland. In Dublin, John established the first inner-city drug and alcohol community-based counselling service for families of those in addiction, and managed a multidisciplinary team of professionals providing care, individual and group psychotherapy services in 2002. He gained his master's degree in drug alcohol policy from Trinity College, and he was trained as a master NLP practitioner and a trainer of energy psychology. John is he's not in Ireland at the moment, he's currently living in the UK. Brilliant. Okay, good evening, John. How are you?
I'm good. Good to talk to you, Alan and Steve.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for coming on, John. John, you have such a wide and varied background there of subject matters that we can go into. So is there anything you want to add to that little bio description before we get into things?
No, I think you've got enough to be going on with there.
Okay, brilliant stuff. Okay, well let's take one of the things that's on your bio, that you're an ex-priest. So tell us why you're an ex-priest.
Yeah. Well, I was in the priesthood for 11 years, as you were saying there from the bio, and generally speaking, there were 11 productive years. They were productive in the sense that I was a very young guy when I went into the priesthood, and it took me up just into my early 30s. So a very formative time, I suppose, in anybody's life. However, as those years were going by, and despite all the fact that I had spent such a long time in training in the seminary prior to that, toward the priesthood, my only kind of focus from being a child was, that was how it was going to be. That was going to be my adulthood and my commitment for life. I within the 11 years that I was a priest, I was soon discovering that for myself, it was squeezing the very life out of me. I was not able to continue to live within the constraints of such an overbearing authority. That you may think should have become very clear to me prior to going into it, but as I say, that doesn't become clear it has taken me some time, both, in the early years after leaving the priesthood and even into more recent years, to really look back and think, what was all that about? What was I all about? What has it brought me to? And certainly, what did I ultimately let go of? I'm delighted to no longer feel part of that outfit. It wasn't serving me well. I wouldn't in any way decry anybody else's life in that, or anybody else's commitment to their Catholic religion, or indeed to any other religion. But for myself, it was not possible to do what was being required of me, which essentially for a Catholic priest is to live with an undivided heart. Alan, Steve, for me, the more I was in that way of life, I found that my heart was becoming more and more divided, for the simple reason that I didn't feel as if I ever had the ability to impose my own freedom, my own choice, my own truth, my own ease of self into the life and the roles and the jobs and the services that were being required of me, without having to constantly look over my shoulder, check in, and see if it was receiving the vote of approval. So yeah, it was a stifling way of life for me, and it was necessary for me to be able to step out from it and discover again how to live my life with those elements of freedom and joy and ease, and still with a very spiritual core to it, but without the confines of it being a religious practice.
Mm. Do you, obviously with everything that's gone on, John, over here with the Ryan report and the abuse being exposed in the Catholic Church, in your time in the seminary and obviously in the religion, did you come across anything that would kind of raise your eyebrows and you'd question?
I suppose, in hindsight, I can say nowadays, yeah, there would have been, but only with that kind of information that, of course, we've recently all gleaned as a result, to be able to look back and think, oh, yeah, he was probably a dubious character. That was probably a little bit odd that sort of behavior went on, or those kinds of situations were there. There was a terrific naivety, and people are exposed to things now that, of course, again, with hindsight, was probably very likely to see would have always been open to possible violations and abuses. But for myself personally, it wasn't within my experience in the years in the seminary, not for me personally, and not with the awareness of anybody else undergoing those particular experiences, horrendous as they have obviously been. Yeah,
well, a lot of people have turned away from the church, obviously. And it's understandable that they would do with what they hear. Now, there are still people now, it's one of these things. I myself, I'm not a churchgoer. I'm more of a spiritual person, as is Steve. I would say, Steve, would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I believe, there's a lot of stuff I question, but I'll be more spiritual.
Rather than going down the Catholic Christian route. And I have my own opinion on it and how I feel about it. And obviously there's people still going to Mass and still going to church, and that's obviously their prerogative. For me, I cannot support an organisation that has done what they've done and gone on for an awful long time, and they cover it up and they move priests around and everything else. I just can't do that. I couldn't support them. So as I say, I'm more of a spiritual person, and I think just confines in the Catholic religion anyway. I don't think, it's too restrictive. That's what I feel.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you're differentiating between, spirituality and religion, which of course more and more people are now being able to do. Certainly that's what I've had to do, disentangle spirituality from religious practice. You see, for myself as a boy, and then certainly as an adult going into the way of life that was, I thought, of course, that the only platform, the only channel, the only means by which I could be a spiritual teacher was the one, of course, that I was first introduced to by my parents, which is namely the religion my family were born into. So, it just didn't come into question. As the years have gone on, I realized that my spirituality has grown enormously, but my religious practice isn't at all necessary to me.
Yeah,
there's a huge difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. We could talk about this all night, but I know that we want to really get in and talk about addiction now. We're going to be
separate from it, because it's very, very much about that business of being closed down, of feeling that there's an overbearing authority, and that authority can be from any place and any type, but which the individual, if this person's in addiction, is forever thinking that they have to measure up to, expectations being asked and requested of them that they're simply not able to meet, maybe are not never needing to meet, but are trying desperately hard to do so. And, so it's very, very much similar, in fact, I would say.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, the addiction side, we're not just referring to the likes of drugs and alcohol, but I want to talk about addiction in particular to power. And this kind of, some people see it as an aphrodisiac. And we have, obviously, people in power are politicians. And they are trying to hold on to this power as much as they can. And there must be a level of addiction with that kind of control that they have, and the amount of people that are under them. Have you come across this at all in your training and dealing with people?
A power from various authorities, do you mean?
Basically, politicians having the power, the addiction to power.
Well, yeah, do you know what? Yeah, I see it in all walks of life, but definitely it's very evident in our politicians, isn't it? I like to listen to guys like Russell Brand, because I see there a fellow who has made it his business, despite his own addictions in his own life. A celebrity there who definitely has discovered how necessary for himself it is to carve out a spirituality, an understanding of the truth of who he is. But he knows full well that as a result of that, he immediately meets with those equally powerful or well-known celebrities who would close him down at the drop of a hat, because it's too threatening. It does actually shake up the status quo. It does actually make sure that people are thinking outside of their box, that they are beginning to listen to their own heart and soul, that they are beginning to speak their own truth, and that has as much validation as anything indeed that's being passed on to them. Now, with governments, unfortunately, it seems to be right across the world, it's like a rash. We have those in that kind of power who maybe at one time, certainly something like the Irish government, probably would have always had at its core wonderful values, things we might call spiritual values. But they're very difficult to see at the moment, aren't they? It's a power-driven, a mind-controlling, as opposed to a freeing, as opposed to an undivided heart, that I was speaking about earlier. Such a huge difference. So, it's very, very evident there. And when people talk about there being psychopaths in control, there's no question about it. That at that level of reality, that is happening. And it's very important that we do develop ourselves so that we can listen to what those people are imposing and be able to not stop off at it. Make sure that we go to heart and soul and see that we're so much more than we would otherwise have ourselves think we are, or be made to think we are, which is a real victim mentality if ever there was one.
Well, we can see with our politicians here with what's going on at the moment, and maybe in the UK it's the same thing with the politicians over there. They're grasping at straws. They know that people are waking up and they know what's going on. Yeah. And they're trying to offer all sorts of things, all sorts of incentives to the people so they can actually stay in power, because it's like, I can only relate it to the corporate world. And I've seen people get, a little bit more power, a little bit more responsibility, a bigger salary. And as time goes on, that grows and grows. And then they just they have their little empires which they protect, and they start doing things that would be out of their character because they want to protect their own area and protect their job and everything else. And I can only relate that to politics being the same thing.
Very much so. Even if they are minions in comparison to the real elite, really pulling the strings, that they nonetheless are finding their own comfort zones, which are no small comforts either, and lording it over those who maybe didn't even vote them in at all. Who are these people? What is this voice? What is this authority? And who has given them such power I mentioned Russell Brand there because he is simply reminding people, maybe it's not a good thing to vote at all, because does it do any good to vote for one over another when in actual fact they're all very much tinged with the same kind of thinking, and it's a similar pattern right across the board. Certainly it's here in the UK. It's very evident in America and places like that, and of course I'm hearing it all the time now from Ireland too.
Yeah, no, we definitely have it over here. Are there any generic processes or things that people do who are addicted to addiction, who are addicted to something? Is there something that's common amongst addicts?
Right. Well, it's interesting that you're kind of, making that kind of link. The interesting thing about generics, you're talking about one time the whole field of addiction, we'll just look at that field for a moment again, was thought to be, you were genetically disposed, that it was predetermined, that you would have certain genes and that they were fixed, and therefore there was going to be a fixed outcome. And if there were alcoholic genes or addiction genes there in your system, that, you'd drawn the short straw and you were going to live out the same life as your father and his father before them and so on. But, that has well and truly been debunked. Science and spirituality have, over the period of years, been able to well and truly dispel that. It's a myth, and I'm pleased to say it's a myth. But what we do know for sure, thanks to a field called epigenetics, is that it's far more the environment that we're exposed to, particularly at an early age. And by the environment, I don't just mean the home environment, but I also mean the people that we're most exposed to, the messages of the people that we're most exposed to, the early impact influences, particularly in the first 7 years, what are called the imprint years of our life, that we continue to carry through in our life. And that, the more consistent that message, then our genes actually are more exposed to the impression made on them. There's a formulation, in other words, a formation that goes on constantly as a result of the realities that we're being exposed to. So in that sense, if you've grown up, and your aim has been to be a politician, but that your constant exposure has been one of the same kind, then, your consistent thoughts and your consistent message will be that reality. There's no question about it.
Well, that's the programming that in the environment that you're in.
Now, the other hand, conversely to that, for the person in addiction, when theirs has been predisposed to a very unhealthy, a very negative way of living, maybe, and there's always, again, in those first imprint years, the first 6-7 years of our life, then, it's very necessary for each of us, aware of that, especially for those with family, with those with children, to absolutely ensure that the message that we give to them is one of example, and that the one of example is one of freedom rather than imposition, and a one of love rather than one of absolute abject fear, if we want to instill in our child a non-addictive, non-fear-filled, non-self-loathing self that forms as the addict in later years.
That's interesting. It's kind of genetically, it's interesting to see, is there something in there regarding a family, and if something inherited. Now, generically, is there something common between addicts?
The real commonality over the 20-odd years, 25 years that I've worked with those in addiction has to be said, and nobody likes to hear this because they shudder at it, but it's always found in their imprint years, and I'm reminding people that that's within the first 7 years of life, and inevitably it's always as a result of a negative trauma that has been experienced. Now that can range from everything as serious as you opened up the show with, of sexual abuse or violation of any kind, to something as, seemingly innocuous as a mother using a tone of voice, or a father for that matter, in the home that, makes the child come to an absolute stop and doesn't make any sense of, because they're still at that age of not having that rational reasoning side of their logic brain formed, but that they immediately just think, is this something to do with me? Am I, the child, the cause of Mummy having a bad hair day today? You know, it's that dramatic, and yet it can be quite innocuous. So it remains in our unconscious. We're not aware of it consciously, but it's very much embedded. It's a default. It's a feeling that we're somehow or other at cause of somebody else's upset. And when it's somebody as close to us as a mother or father, that's considerably serious, because it has a huge impact on every other outlook that we make on life. So I would have to say that if there's a commonality about everybody in addiction, it would be the simplest way to answer it was, yes, it's always found in childhood.
Okay, that's interesting. Steve, you've got a few questions for John.
Yeah, John, there's a couple of questions come in already. I do expect more. I expect a barrage of questions the further we go down this little rabbit hole. But just when we spoke at the beginning of religion, Mr. T actually has a couple of questions. And one of the ones that he has in relation to the religious side of things, he was wondering, do you believe Jesus actually existed?
I'm sure the person of Jesus did, whether he was called Jesus or not. I'm sure that person was a real life person. I to this day, maybe it's just going a little bit past that question. So yeah, I'm sure he was a real life person. Okay. But the message, the Christ message, is incredibly powerful and valuable.
Yeah.
And whatever has been shrouded around that message in terms of story, fantasy, mixture of other scriptures all kind of squeezed together. But when we untangle and pick out what we have left of the Christ message, it's a wonderfully empowering vision of life, isn't it? I mean, it's extraordinarily freeing. It's all about and only about freedom. Where we get any other interpretation of that has to be put down to what religions have then imposed on the man, Jesus, and certainly the Christ message. It's bizarre to think that they almost don't resemble one another at all.
Yeah, I would tend to kind of believe that myself. But I mean, from what I've heard as well, that okay, maybe there was a Jesus and a person who did kind of spread the word and in a positive way. But when maybe all the stories in relation of turning water into wine and
sure.
they could be fabricated. We don't really have, as far as I'm aware, and I don't know a whole hell of a lot, but as far as I'm aware, we only have the Bible's teachings to back that up.
Unfortunately, overlaid, isn't it, with interpretation after interpretation, and usually by preference of what meaning we want to make of it.
Exactly.
But the very, very freeing Christ message, and it is incredibly freeing, is one of great hope and one of great joy and one of absolute empowerment. But what we've done to it is really something quite else. It really, really is. Yeah. The whole thing of miracle working is surely opening our eyes to the more of ourselves that we truly are, and to the more of life that life truly is, without all the things you've been talking about in this program, without the mind control, without people interfering, without people keeping us limited in our box, without an authority thinking it needs to be so overbearing in our lives. Our spirit knows full well how to live life without any of that. And I'm sure that's right at the heart of the Christ message.
Yeah, I often wonder, was part of the message kind of scrambled in some way that, maybe what it should be actually saying is you as a person, or you as a soul or a spirit, you can manifest everything that you need. You put it out to like some of the teachings of The Secret, for example.
Yep,
whatever
absolutely.
you want, you put it to the universe, and the universe will give it back to you. So maybe that's what Jesus may have been saying. Excuse me. But obviously, people who maybe wrote the Bible, they didn't want people obviously to know that you are the master of your own destiny. They obviously wanted to maybe put their own spin on it, so therefore they could capitalize on it and invent a religion, therefore, to control people.
I have no doubt that what you're saying is exactly as it is. Yeah. And that we therefore owe it to ourselves to constantly disentangle the many truths that have been put as the truth and decide for ourselves, which we simply need to do by, taking a nice deep breath and consulting our inner self. And it's very, very easy, isn't it, for us to discern what is and what is not.
Exactly.
What gives life and what closes it down.
I'd have to say on that, one of the things on your bio there, you say you're an energy technology. You've used a trainer of energy technology. Now, personally, it's very easy for me. If the energy's good and it's a good thing, then I'm happy with that. But if it's anything negative or it's bad, then I don't stay away from it. I don't go down that road. I mean, that's how simple it is for me.
It is as simple as that, and we make life incredibly complicated. It's obvious that you just have to kind of rub the two palms of your hands together, Alan and Steve, and you'll realize, of course, there's energy there. There's the friction. We can feel it. Now, if we use that energy of ourself, and how could we not? Because, as long as your eyelids are flickering and your heart's beating and your pulse is pulsating, well, it's an energy. It's a whole source of energy. Now, we can harness that. And we can use it to terrific effect. We can do it, of course, through our minds, but ultimately we do it from our heart. We're just discovering that our heart is something like 5,000 times more electromagnetically powerful than the brain. That's huge. In other words, it has the capacity of storing an amazing amount of data, and it does, from our past, in the present, and is able to go out into the future and hold that too for us. And yet, how much of the time do we ever just listen to our heart? Listen to our heart, and then let that be the truth of our being. We haven't discovered that. We certainly weren't taught that in school. I certainly wasn't taught that in school or in the seminary, to really listen to my heart. If you do so and speak from the heart, it's such a different message. And you'll always be able to tell the difference between when a person is speaking from their heart and soul to the one that's just speaking off the top of their head, Well, I normally say it's kind of as straight as this, as simple as this. Love is the answer. Now, what's the question? Absolutely. End of, isn't it?
That's the end of, full stop. I mean, people complicate things, and it's not complicated. It's very easy.
Well, complicated. We're talking about miracles and, the Christ miracles. For years, people like Deepak Chopra have been reminding us of the miracle that's going on in our bodies every day. He talks about making a new liver every 6 weeks. We make a new skin once a month. We have a new stomach lining every 5 days, a new skeleton every 3 months, new brain cells every year. Even our DNA is changing every 6 weeks. So, with that kind of wonder going on inside ourselves, you'd have to wonder, therefore, how do we ever convince ourselves that once we're addicted to something like alcohol, it could be a lifelong, imprisonment? That's a bizarre thing. Of course, we're capable of moving way beyond those things, but it's been selectively decided to not give that to the masses as a truth.
Of course, it's control, and this is one of the things we do talk about on a regular basis, the control of the masses. They have the knowledge, and they don't want us to have the knowledge because they want to have the control. We have more questions there, Steve.
Yeah, okay.
This is kind of more of a comment that I just came into my head when you were speaking about the heart, and
right.
It's amazing. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but I've noticed it, and I've certainly my wife, and I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning it. She notices it too, and sometimes it scares her. When I know we're kind of saying listen to your heart, it was meant in one context, but in another context, have you ever been lying? Has anyone ever been lying in bed at night? There's absolutely your mind is clear. You're probably waiting to go asleep, or maybe you've just woken up. I don't know. But for a couple of moments, you may be lying there, whatever way you're lying. You could be lying on your arm, but you can actually feel and hear your heart beating. And a lot of people, that scares the life out of them because it reminds them that beating, when that stops, they're gone. And it's just, it brings, when you have a clear mind, just the beating of your heart, it brings everything kind of into context.
It does. It reminds us that we're mortal beings. In other words, that this little form that we're in at present, that which you call Alan, that which you call Steve, that which I'm, learned to call John, will have its day, but life doesn't. The life force that is beating in each of you and in me and in everybody listening to the program this evening, wherever they are in the world, that's life. Life is just lifing us. We're not having to do anything at all about it. Now, we could find that scary, the fact that it might come to an end, or we could realize that life just doesn't. Life just does not come to an end. Well, so what have we to be afraid of at all?
I tend to say, John, I know where I'm going, I just don't know how I'm going to get there.
Yeah. And I would say it's the last of your problems
to
know how you're going to get there, because for sure you'll get there.
That's guaranteed. Anyway,
wherever you came from and wherever you're going to, really, does it matter? Does it matter? I have a beautiful being in my life at the moment. He's my great nephew, Aidan, and Aidan's just turned 5 years old. Now, the beauty about him in my life at the moment is, for Aidan, he's teaching me how to live life. If I didn't get it right in my own life, oh, wow, is that little boy teaching me how to do it again? Because for Aidan, if something's not happening now, it's just not happening. Mm. So for Aidan, you could say, tomorrow we're going to have a great day on the beach, or we're going to do something fantastic this evening. But he'll just look blank at me, because he'll just say, well, can we not just do it now? That tells you everything, doesn't it? If we're forever projecting and waiting for things to happen before they can happen, it's a very, very miserable existence.
Well, John, we can definitely vouch for that, because myself and Steve are both dads.
I thought you were going to say we're both miserable.
No, we're both dads, and our kids say, "Oh, we want it now. We don't want it tomorrow. We want it now." So we have that first-hand experience. Trust me.
So it's going to move you on. It just pulls you into the now anyway, doesn't it? And it's not surprising. Again, it's one of those beautiful Christ messages. Unless you become like little children, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. What does that mean? Unless you actually remind yourself of the truth of who you are with its simplicity, you'll miss everything.
And you have to go and find yourself and find out who you are. I've said that time and time again to people. You have to find out who you are as a person. And if you know who you are as a person, then, especially people who are single and you want to go out dating, you have to find out who you are first. Find out and love yourself, love you.
Absolutely.
Because
I was just going to say, and unfortunately, we've handed our life over to so many people who've taught us how to be, and unfortunately, they're people who've probably never ever asked the question of themselves, who am I?
Yeah, definitely. Steve, more questions there.
Yeah, I know we're kind of staying on the subject, and we know we have a lot to get through. So I'm gonna change it ever so slightly, John. We've another question from Mr. T, and he's wondering, what are your thoughts? The fact that you've counselled people again with the likes of drugs. Do you think all drugs should be legal, or do you think all drugs should be illegal, or what's your basic thoughts on drugs?
Although it's not usually the kind of banter and debate I like to get heavily into, because there's so many people doing it, and it remains very much a mind-based thing, a head-based thing. But it's an argument basically. However, if we move past the argument and we simply look at anything, and that happens to be the topic that's being brought up there, if we keep it in the dark, if we're frightened to, and legalizing something is likely to at least make it more transparent. People are going to then think, oh, what is this thing that, for long enough was kept so hidden and removed from us, that was meant to seem so powerful or scary that we weren't meant to experiment with it, understand it, know a bit more about it. That can't possibly serve any purpose. So I would just say that, making something illegal doesn't necessarily serve our development, our expansion very well at all as human beings. The more we actually are unafraid of something, the less likely we're going to give it ourselves such power and authority over our lives anyway.
Well, to be honest with you, if you look at countries who are legalizing or have legalized the likes of, say, cannabis, No, I'm not saying that we should do this, but to be honest with you, industrial hemp, the CBD in industrial hemp is a benefit to medically for patients who are suffering.
Beneficial. Yeah, and of
definitely.
course so many other plants and herbs and things, but we've literally not even begun to allow ourselves to explore and to experiment with, have immense medicinal benefits to us, of course.
Yeah, and the thing is, if we had, say, cannabis shops where you can go in and buy them, stuff like that, the whole kind of the fad, the whole idea that it's now legal, that will all kind of fade away. Like when you go over to Amsterdam, it's there, second nature, and yet people just don't bother with it because they know it's like going in to get like a slice of bread. So it's there, and the whole kind of novelty idea will just wear off.
I would say so, and it's certainly far less likelihood of people doing what's sometimes called abusing it, using it without any understanding of how excessive use of anything can be, detrimental to us. Yeah,
exactly.
Of course, we could just take it or leave it, and for the most part, probably people will leave it. But if they are actually really looking into it and are able to, they will find the proper medicinal qualities that are there in all of those natural growths, and cannabis is one of them, marijuana one of them, and proper use, educated use, intelligent use. Free use. Yeah,
exactly. And but some people do have an addictive personality, though.
Well, do they?
Well, I think they do. I think some people, when I say that, is they will. It doesn't have to be drugs. It could be whatever. But whatever it is, there's something in them that triggers them, and they have this impulse to be addicted to something or whatever they're doing. Now, I'm not saying it's OCD by any means, but I do think there's some people. I mean, I know one girl in particular I met, and she actually was in for drugs, and she got clean, and she became very kind of controlling of everything in her life. She had to control everything because of this addiction that she went through.
Well, I wouldn't call that an addictive personality. I think that's one of those kind of borrowed titles or something for a thing. But if we look at it carefully, and even using the term addictive personality, that means that a person, a character who's created a personality about them, has within that found life incredibly difficult. So I would be going back to find out, well, why was that so? Long before anybody became addicted to anything, what yawning gap was in that person's life to make it so necessary to have to go to such bizarre lengths, to do such bizarre things, even when they were incredibly self-harming to themselves, to their physical self, that would at least make the other emptiness feel, a little more bearable and less unbearable to tolerate. That's what we're not addressing. So when people are saying, how do you overcome addictions? Do you know what? That's not the starting place. What's causing such unhappiness, such deep unfulfillment in more and more and more people across the planet? And it's you've already been touching and giving the answers to it within your own program, which is what's so lovely about your program, because we're not yet discovering what it is to be a human being. A human being that has heart, that hasn't even been listened to. A human being that is a soul. A human being that is a spirit. That human being that does not require prescribed medications in order to feel a little bit better. We have been dwarfed. Our doors have been closed in. We are living in such tiny little capacity about ourselves. And that's really what's causing us to go to, as I say, bizarre lengths, just in order to say, hello, does anybody know I'm here?
Yeah.
It's a very, very sad indictment on us as a planet that we've reached this stage. And I don't think we're touching on people's addictive behaviors at all. I don't think people have this addictive personality, just by drawing the short straw. Again, it's a learned thing. It's a thing that we don't come out of the womb with a bottle of beer in our hand.
No, I totally agree.
Or a handful of medication or a syringe. We learn. We learn things. what it is to be so squeezed of life, and we have to go to dramatic effects to make that feel at least more bearable.
It goes back to the nature versus nurture.
Right? Go on, tell me more.
Well, basically, when a baby's born, as you say, he doesn't come out with a bottle of beer, and that's nurtured. It's something like that, people's kind of belief systems when they grow up with certain families believe certain ways, where they weren't born with that. Nature didn't give them that. They was nurtured in their growth.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit there about nature versus nurture. But, it's almost kind of Darwinian, that, in its thinking, isn't it? It's, and I think we're ready to debunk a lot of that too. We didn't come in here just to survive. We're talking about, we have this survival instinct about ourselves, that we're forever in fight or flight. Well, what is really creating that in our lives? What really is that? When we come into the womb, my 5-year-old great nephew Aidan, he's not living in a survival archetype. It's something that he would have to discover yet. And it'd be to my intent and purposes that he never has to discover how to survive, but that he just lives. That he just lives. And of course that will come through nurturing, but most of all it'll come from just acceptance, valuing him, allowing him to be the truth of all he is before ever he has to discover how to live somebody else's version of it.
Well, funny, I said that, I think, on last week's show, that we are surviving, we're not living at the moment with everything that's going on, But, yeah, Steve, you more. We're just watching the time. Steve, you have more questions.
Yeah, I have more questions and comments. This is one that just came into my mind in relation to being, an addictive personality. I wouldn't necessarily believe that someone would have an addictive personality. What I would believe to be true would be that a person could be going through something at a particular moment in time, and maybe, it could be food. Someone would start eating a lot of food, and then that could be an addiction. It's filling a void. Maybe there is a void or a hole or something, and if someone is offered drugs, be they legal or illegal, and depending, they could just latch onto that. But I think it's more of a latching onto something like a crutch more so than an addiction. But that's just my own personal opinion. But John, would you say, in your experience and the people that you've counselled, just in relation to drugs, would you say that there are more people addicted to illicit drugs, or would you say there are more people addicted to mainstream, the likes of, say, psychotropic drugs?
Oh, yeah. Oh, by far and away. We used to talk about something like cannabis being the gateway drug to harder drugs. The gateway drug, if there's such a thing now, is prescribed, medicated drug taking. Our GPs, our doctors, our surgeries, our hospitals, they're the legalized drug pushers.
Yeah. That kind of corroborates information that we've been kind of looking at over the past couple of weeks, whereby people, there's seemingly the psychiatry community, they have a massive manual, and they add to it year by year with all these different, what would you call them? Symptoms, yeah, if you want to call it symptoms that they put into it, or disorders. Like, off the top of the head, one that they can now medicate with psychotropics is shyness. They have a different name for it. It's a disorder. Shyness, yeah.
I thought that's 6 bottles of Budweiser.
No, seriously, they've
got drugs for shyness.
They've actually called it, and it's SAD, and it's not the seasonal adjustment. It's SAD, social anxiety disorder. There we go. Social anxiety disorder is now medicated with psychotropics, and that is it's shyness, by want of another word.
I just used to go to a pub and drink. That sorted out my shyness. get drunk.
And to be honest, I suppose you did go and get drunk one night and came back and felt less shy for whatever you thought you were being shy about. It would serve the purpose. But to be on medication for an eternity, which unfortunately is the way it has been turning out to be. People come out of doctor's surgeries and it's like they've been shopping in the supermarket. They come out with bagfuls of medication. Here in England, of course, they have this National Health Service where largely speaking, people aren't having to always pay, although that's changing quite rapidly, for their prescriptions. And as a result, they're leaving with huge amounts of medication. My mother's on medication. I'd look at what my mother got. I ask her, do you know what that pill is for? Hasn't a clue. Do you know what this one's for? No idea. Do you know how often you have to take this or for how long? No idea. Now that's outrageous. That is absolutely criminal.
Well, that's just perpetual, they have a perpetual license to print money, because that's what we know about the pharmaceutical industry and how they work. They don't want to cure people. They want people on perpetual drugs. So every month, like the diabetic who needs his drugs every month, that's what they would do. They don't want to cure the cause. They just want to treat the symptom. And treating the symptom is having these monthly drugs that you have to buy. And that goes all in. And the same with the whole thing about the cancer charities. I mean, there's an article there during the week on Facebook, and people are talking about, the cancer charities. And I put on a link saying, look, they've had a cure for cancer since the 1930s. All you have to do is look up Royal Raymond Rife, and look up the technology he had to cure cancer. But they don't want to tell you that there's multiple cures out there for cancer, because their revenue stream would dry up.
Well, actually, if I can just interject before John responds, in that documentary I watched in relation to the psychotropic drugs and all that kind of addiction, they do say that in the pharmaceutical companies are on record as saying that the one of the worst things you can do is cure someone. The second worst thing you can do is kill them.
Yeah.
So I mean, sure. What do they want? They want them on the medication for the rest of their natural life.
Yeah.
No, it's dire, and unfortunately it goes with the term evidence-based and research. But if we look at the evidence base for any of their methods or any of the research that they're so-called researched, it's such an inside job. It's really quite ridiculous. It actually is such a make-believe, if ever there was one. But unfortunately, people have gone like lambs to the slaughter, because I talk in my book, Addiction Unplugged, How to Be Free, that, outside of the religions, probably the world of addiction is the place where you see people most in victim mentality. Now, nobody likes to be called a victim. I haven't yet come across a victim who's ever liked to be called a victim. People just deny it. They don't like it. They'll convince you that they're not being. But in actual truth, as a world, as a planet of people, we've all been cast under the spell of victim mentality. And we really have to grow up, really ditch such dreadful, dire limitations about our humanity and go free and start speaking our own truth. And will soon it does actually resemble the Christ message that we were speaking about before, because it makes perfect common sense. It's common sense. The trouble with common sense is it's not very common.
Well, the trouble with common sense is the people that have it. Some people say it's natural thing. Everybody has it, but not everybody has it, and it can be a curse, because you have to deal with people who don't have it.
Yeah, well, that's just called living on this planet. But we're all living at different levels of consciousness. That's for sure. We can't not be conscious. Everything's consciousness. But, we are living at different levels of consciousness. And there'll be different members of each person's family that are at different levels of conscious awareness. And it's one of the things that we simply have to accept, to literally allow all others to be that which they are. But we definitely owe it to ourselves, once we have stepped outside of our box of limitation, to make sure that we keep expanding, and that actually by doing that, in all likelihood, will infect others with the very same desire to do likewise.
Well, what you're talking about, John, is the awakening process, because
it is.
When people do wake up to what's going on, the learning curve is just incredible, because your mind is open. As you say, your mind is like a parachute. It works better when it's open. And,
absolutely. It's this whole thing called awakening, or to be more enlightened. There's a beautiful piece. I like the writing of a guy called Adi Ashanti. And, I was just looking at a book of his recently, and he speaks of being more awake or being more enlightened like this. It's quite a different way to the way we normally think of enlightenment. But Adi Ashanti says, make no mistake about it, enlightenment or awakening is a destructive process. It has nothing to do with becoming better or being happier. Enlightenment is the crumbling away of untruth. It's seeing through the facade of pretense. It's the complete eradication of everything we imagined to be true.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's a very, very powerful statement. And I'm sure that's bang on the nail of what we are all having to just seep in, savor, let's re-soak in, and then recognize that's what we've all been allowing to happen, And we've got to make sure that untruth does give way, does crumble away, does just fall away.
Yeah, that's what's happening now, John. I think there's a massive awakening going on the planet. But listen, we need to touch base on the NLP, because I did mention to you there before we came on air, it's concerning seeing the likes of our Garda Síochána and the police and various people in power with what they're doing. There's no morals and no empathy, and they're like trained zombies. And people have said to me that some people they've known before they've went into the guards have come out completely different. And and this is just my own belief and what I just feel, that whatever is done in their training, their 6 months of training, there must be some level of NLP being used. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, well, for me, I became what they call a practitioner of NLP, which really is, the letters stand for neuro-linguistic programming. So it's a programming of your neurology, and of course your use of linguistics, your language, your spoken language. And it was back in about the year 1999 or 2000. I was living in Ireland at the time, and at that period, I was really wanting. I was long out of the priesthood. I was already working in the field of addiction. I was married, and myself and my partner were looking at all kinds of different ways to literally expand ourselves. We made it our business to actually make sure we did extend our own spiritual depth and our own wisdom of life. And, NLP was one of those things, along with things like hypnotherapy and various other modalities and teachings and trainings that we delved into. For me, the training of NLP, which I then became a master practitioner of, was fantastic, because it simply reminded me that what I think I'm communicating isn't always what the person listening to me is hearing. And by that, I had to discover through NLP that each of us learn very differently. We're either more visual in our learning. That means we learn we think in picture images, or we're more auditory, in which case it's learning through what we hear. We kind of intake information that way and speak it that way. We'll use our language like that. Or we're more kinesthetic. We're more feeling. We need to get a feel for things, right? Now, if I'm speaking to an audience of 200 people, right, at a seminar or a conference, speaking about addiction, I have to know in my audience that there are some people who learn better through picture images, some who learn better by hearing the words that I speak, and others who just want to get out there and do it. They want to have the feeling of it, okay? They want to. It's like the person who's the car mechanic. He'll find sitting listening to a teacher talking it very boring, but he'll just open the bonnet, and as soon as I get under that thing, I'll know exactly what to do. Just pass me the spanner, right? Yeah. So that's the kinesthetic person. Now, for me, that was a great discovery, because I realized that if I want to really appeal to the person who is the kinesthetic words, I have to use words like, if you want to get a grasp of what I'm saying, if you want to really get a feel for what I'm putting across here, and then I would have the attention of the kinesthetic person in my audience. Meanwhile, across the floor of my 200 people, I'm going to have most people who just simply want to hear auditory, and they're going to be perfectly happy to listening to just the sound of my voice speaking. They'll want to, but there'll also be a high number of people who are visual, who'll actually want to see picture images of what I'm speaking, and I need to give them an open window of what the picture of what my words might look like for the visual person, would sound like for the auditory person, or would feel like for the person who's more kinesthetic in their disposal. Now, I didn't know any of that when I was a kid, and most schools still today still rely on the auditory, right? The auditory, the teacher speaks, you listen, you simply take in information, write it down, pass an exam. But inevitably, when I was a child, I failed all my exams because I was a visual learner. I would look out the window. I would get a crack over the head because the teacher said, John, you're daydreaming. Actually, I wasn't. But I was listening to the teacher, and in my internal system, I was looking for a picture image of it in order to make sense of what she was saying to me. And then it made perfect sense. Oh, now I get you, right? Are you with me?
Yeah, no, totally. When you were talking about that, I was just thinking about the school system over here in Ireland, because they're planning or they're aiming to change the system because they now realise that people learn differently, not all the same. And I call it garbage in, garbage out from a university point of view. And if you're good at doing the garbage in, garbage out, you'll get your exams and you get your qualifications. Yeah. But now they're realising that, well, people do learn differently. We're not all the same.
Absolutely. You'll get through. You'll be a robot or something, won't you, when you've got through? Or you'll wonder then how to communicate with people if you are suddenly meeting with people who communicate differently to you. But you'll have got your qualifications, and unfortunately that's what school's based on. But at the same time, schools, education systems have ruled out huge numbers of other children who simply do not learn that way. Now, that's the basis of NLP. And so you can see it's incredibly valuable, or can be used in a very, very valuable way. For me, it was a huge eye-opener. And still I would be aware of all those fundamentals when speaking to my own audience, so that I make sure I'm holding their attention, that I'm actually speaking to them in a manner in which will make sense to the different ways that they prefer to learn: auditory, visual, or kinesthetic feeling.
Oh, okay. Well, John, we have a few questions that we need to get through, and we're watching the time. And also, obviously, if we can touch base on the NLP, which you might think was possible.
I know you probably want to look at how it's misused. And
yes.
Well enough, you can certainly see how it would be, and I couldn't agree more. People will definitely abuse any great thing.
Common purpose and common core are the questions used. But Steve has a few questions, so if we can run through them, and obviously maybe include the whole police Garda thing as well. But Steve, we're over to you for the questions.
Okay. Yeah, John, we have a question. We have a comment from Sean on People's Internet Radio. Thanks for that, Sean. And we have a question from Siobhan. So I'll go with Sean's comment. Sean says NLP is useful for dealing with extreme phobias and reactions, but it has to be used with moderation. He says it can be a useful but a dangerous tool. I think we'll all agree. We can all agree with that. Yeah. And following on from that, Siobhan wants to know, can John explain his way of escaping from using NLP to the wider public? Does he have anything to say on common purpose and how they infiltrate our society?
So how to escape? Do you mean how to escape it if you feel as though you've been caught up in the people misusing it?
I'm guessing that's what she means, yeah, because the common purpose in the schools.
Well, like everything, to become more aware of what I've, in a nutshell, already explained about NLP in its very simple way, simply learning as auditory, visual, or kinesthetic. Even if you just had that knowledge at your disposal, okay, you can sit in any situation listening to any speaker, and you'll soon notice for yourself whether they're using that very same method in order to manipulate you, as opposed to being able to simply communicate with you. You'll be able to, so it's basically becoming more aware. As you become, never be frightened of anything. Something like NLP is only a technique. Now, a technique is a technique. What's a technique? It's a process, isn't it? It's a method. Now, if we look at the method that's being developed, and it's called NLP, it's got some marvelous things about it. And marvelous things about it can be used to do not very marvelous things with it. But if we actually simply know what it is, rather than be frightened to even look at it, then we'll be able to sit in any place where people are using whatever method, and we'll be able to soon know whether it's detrimental to us or whether it's actually really quite enhancing. There are many, many ways by which you can take your way, escape, as I think the questioner was asking, but you don't need to escape in fear. You can actually stay very present in it and know it won't harm you if you are aware. If you are aware.
But in a school situation, John, let's say for argument's sake, we send our children to school. They're getting, as we think, educated, but it's other stuff that's going on, but with the Common Core. But if we suspected that our children were being subjected to NLP in a kind of a negative way, or even if the child came home and the child was, as most parents take an interest in what the kids learn, and if based on what the child is saying, we felt that this could be a little bit of NLP going on, it could be a bit of Common Core. Is there anything that we can, what information would you tell a child? I mean, would you say, just listen to it, use discernment, or how would you explain it to a child, what to watch out for?
Well, a child in that situation, the parent often enough is going to have to take responsibility enough for any child's education, for any child's input, wherever it comes from. And if the parent is really very much aware of the fact that that school system is infiltrating the mind in a very detrimental way and imposing thoughts upon that child that are very much controlling and in a very negative way, then I would say, first port of call is, consider removing your child from that environment. Because if you've become aware and alerted to that, and it is detrimental to the very one that you love, then, not a good idea. You can certainly also confront the teaching authority that is purposely doing that, because that doesn't enter in. I, as I say, would use many of the mechanics of NLP simply because I realize sometimes it's called the art and science of communication. It's a learning how we can better communicate to another. But there's no way that I would use it in order to sort of drop in a message that would go into the unconscious mind of somebody that would be of a detriment, especially to a child or to anybody wanting to form their life differently, more fully, but by any kind of deliberation. So as a parent, if you became aware of that, yes, certainly change the environment and make sure that the child's own environment is one that you actually bring great security to, and make sure that that child does also become, whatever the child's age would be, more aware too of just how those things can be used and can be used detrimentally, so that the child also quickly learns to discern for themselves. They'll know the difference once they become aware. Awareness is everything. Awareness, I can't stress that enough. Until we become more consciously aware, we're living way below our level of potentiality. We are consciousness. And in school education systems, just like any education systems, the basics have always been there. Truth comes from authority. Intelligence is the ability just to remember and repeat. Accurate memory and repetition, they get to be rewarded. Non-compliance gets to be punished. It's a horrible backbone, but that's always been there in various education systems in one form or another. And in the one that I'm, working in the field of, the one of addiction therapies and treatments, it runs through most recovery systems. It's a very punishing system. I can't stand the mainstream versions of trying to bring people through their recovery system. They rely heavily on those punishing techniques, and their various methods are, very, very judgmental. We don't require any of those things. They're some of those untruths that need to be absolutely pulled down, like that statement I spoke to you of Adyashanti's before. They have no place in our lives whatsoever. We need to be very aware of that, and make sure that we constantly are aware of where we allow our children to be educated and where we actually go and source our own forms of education too.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what a lot of parents are kind of doing, especially in small villages. Well, I know I'm doing it anyway. I can't speak for everybody. But in kind of rural Ireland, there's small villages, and maybe not so much NLP, but definitely Common Core, Common Purpose has begun to infiltrate into Irish schools. It's there. We know about it. Maybe it's not there in a big amount, but it's definitely creeping in. And in some of the places in Ireland, like, you cannot take the child out of school because the next nearest school could be 20, 30 miles away. So I mean, what I generally do is, and you know, maybe it's kind of food for thought for a lot of people. When you are listening to what your children are doing in school, and they're telling you about their day and what they learned, and this is kind of dinner time conversation in our house. And then if there's an issue, if I think there's an issue, I will always tell my children that, you know, maybe what the teacher is saying might not be correct. And I always say, ask questions. Don't just believe everything the teacher tells you just because the teacher, you know, my son for a long time believed that the teacher was all seeing, all knowing because she was the teacher. You know, it's like the way people would look back at Jesus Christ and they would have believed everything because, well, he was the teacher. And, you know, I kind of just say to my son, ask questions. If there's something that doesn't sit right, and I know Alan's the same, if something doesn't sit right, if it doesn't feel right, ask questions, and never be afraid to ask questions. And if the teacher can't give a good enough answer, come home, we'll discuss it at home, and we'll try and thrash it out. And if it's a case of I find an alternative view on what he's learning in school, I'll give him the alternative view, because, as we always say, it's like a seesaw. You know, if you only have one side, you know, the information from one side, well, you can't really have a balanced viewpoint. So we always kind of, you know, get information from different sources, just so the kids have balance in their life, if you like.
It's crucial, and the most important thing of all, of course, is to listen to the child, who when not having all of that input from adults, will actually know their own. They'll know their own truth. The child actually is the teacher of the adult, if we could just but get that. You know, the child is here to teach the adult. The adult's already forgotten to remember the truth of who they are. The child, any child in our life, is constantly there to actually teach us again how to unlearn and unknow half of the absolute rubbish that we've tried to make work, and called it, you know, this is how to live life. It's just, you know, it really has to go. We've got a lot of things to fall away. Lots and lots of things to just let go.
Okay, can we just touch base on the NLP regarding, obviously, institutes like the police force and the Gardai, and the possibility of NLP being used on them?
Well, I'm sure it is, you know, because certainly I know that, a thing like NLP, again, it's really, I keep reminding you, it is only in itself a method, a technique, but it has been used and then used to various ways by various people for various outcomes. So if it has been harnessed by those in any authority, and if it is there in the Gardai Síochána and used by different power authorities, then sure, it will be being used, I'm sure, very detrimentally indeed. And it is something, therefore, that we, again, I can only go back to, if you be like, same with the thing we were talking about before, you know, legalizing or not legalizing something like cannabis. I was saying, look, if you legalize things, it becomes more transparency on it. So if you want to find out something more about NLP, go and find out something more about it. You will understand it, and you will know, once you do, whether a process, a technique like that is being used correctly or incorrectly, you know, positively or very negatively. Now, the very fact that the Gardai, of course, are supposed to be there as a protector of the community seems to have unfortunately been hijacked, hasn't it? That is their significance. It always has been, just like the police force is supposed to be here in the UK. But I'm sad to say that is looking less the case, that it has become, you know, almost the force that's wanting to watch your every move in case you step out of line. You might call that fascist.
Right, okay. Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, the way things are at the moment, the insensitivity, the lack of morals and empathy from the Gardai at the moment over here, and in the UK and other countries around the world, it just seems to be getting worse. But we'll move on anyway, because I've got a question here. Okay, I'm just having a look there. Now, something, just a listener did email us and said that Google are getting into education, and is that NLP? I'm not too sure whether they're going to try and use NLP on Google.
But see, NLP is, it's a clever little technique. It's a wonderful eye opener for the person discovering it. But there are many other insidious things that are being used. It's not just about a little thing like NLP. There are vindictive motives, and people will often use vindictive motives for vindictive aims. Now, the amount that we allow ourselves to be exposed to those is something that, from our awareness, we have to be very vigilant about. And we have to selectively, very, very selectively get better at stepping, again, out of our victim mentality, making ourselves very, very much more aware of ourselves and of all that is going on in life, and then make sure we move beyond those things that would otherwise very, very easily, keep us pigeonholed, keep us very limited, very locked in, and very disabled.
Well, that's what they want us to do.
Well, sure, they may want a way, but, can that happen to a whole world of people? It really is wake-up time, big wake-up, world, because, if it is happening, and I don't disagree with you one bit. I can see it. I saw it in my own authority that I left many years ago within the church. I can see it right across the addiction field in every way. The fact that something like Alcoholics Anonymous, NA, they seem very harmless. But why? Why is that being allowed to be the one and only source of people being able to move through their addictions, which is free wherever you go, which people have to scramble about and arrange for themselves? Doesn't that suit? Doesn't that fall nicely into hands with the same prescribed medicating process, which actually makes billions of money? When you put those two things together, you've got to look and think, hang on, a little bit insidious stuff going on here, a little bit sinister perhaps. Don't like it. Surely we're, as a people, far more capable than this. And we are. And we really need to keep voicing that and looking for the more that we truly deserve, and making sure that those, again, in the field that I'm working in addiction, are treated to so much more information, proper information, spiritual information, scientific, medical health information. That's far more than just the little snippets that we'll be given, by our doctors, by our priests, by our governments, by our politicians. That's not going to be adequate. We're going to have to look for the truth, the truths, the many truths that lie way beyond those limited channels that we've been receiving them from.
But the problem is, John, that you know yourself, that it takes energy to do things, and a lot of people rely on the nanny state, and because the nanny state is there, they think, oh, well, I don't want to make the effort, I can't be bothered. That's why, and the nanny state holds all of us back, or the people who want to move on, because we can only go as fast as the slowest person. And the slowest person is probably the person who relies on a nanny state. So we are all being penalised because of them few people who don't want to make the effort.
Yeah, we've really got to make sure that it's not just a few people waking up and thinking that's adequate. There are very few great leaders in the world, and there have been very few great leaders in the world for a very long time. There are very few people who are in positions of authority really speaking from their heart, really speaking very rousingly. I have great admiration for the Irish and always have had. They have for centuries always had the very, very best of speakers, great orators, people who would really be able to speak with eloquence and be able to stir very, very very, very, very vociferously and very energetically the people around about them. But even the Irish now are looking a bit jaded. And I mean Irish right across the world. The place of Ireland, without question, and its people are very, very sacred. And I say that not glibly. I really, really mean that. I do believe it's a very, very special part of the world. It's sometimes been called the heart chakra of the world. And I'm delighted that the people are still there, to the best of their ability, speaking out about outrageous things like water charges, umpteen times over, and the ridiculousnesses that are hiding behind the guises of those things. But ultimately, as a people, a conscious people, we've got to constantly be thinking of everything imaginable to bring us back to the truth of who we really are. So much more to that, until at last that becomes the leadership that speaks, and speaks as powerfully as it ever once did. That it should speak as powerfully and as eloquently as maybe that Christ message speaks, that ultimately only about freedom, irregardless of how many other sources would like to think us otherwise. We've really, really got to, I'm doing my utmost, I'm doing almost like a lone voice in the addiction field, believe me. I do speak a very, very different message, because it suits even the treatment centres and the recovery processes to keep people en masse in that vegetated state, thinking that they have to be in a potential, a lifelong situation of being in recovery. And I've been knocking that on their head. That to me is like a death knell. What do you want to be doing that for, Living your life in recovery? No. We are so much more than that. As a being, we didn't come into this world to live a life in recovery. What a nonsense that is. We just live. And we've got to, and it's my everyday waking hour message of life to those that I'm privileged to be speaking to.
Excellent.
To give yourself back to yourself, the truth of who you are.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the waking up process. I see it, and seeing it during the week actually on Facebook, where, as I say, we have the water protesters, and people are beginning to question things now. And people saying, I never realised that. And by them saying that, it's that they were in the matrix. And now they've stepped outside the matrix, and now they're realising what's going on, and it's great to see. So it is happening. But we go over to Steve. We have about 5 minutes or so left. So Steve, if you have any questions there, we can quick fire them over to John.
Yeah, John, do you want to comment on Alan's last comment there?
Well, no, I'm just saying it is great to see. I have every confidence that life, because it has been going on for a very long time, and so has this planet for a very, very long time, will continue to do so. And I do believe that we're breaking through some of those very dark experiences that this world has been going through.
Yeah.
I haven't yet spoken very, very much about the addiction field, but one, just to kind of run off, and certainly if there are any questions or anything, I'm happy to give an answer to them. But I would just like to, anybody listening to this program who is either touched on any of the things that I've been speaking about, or, is looking for an entirely different approach to overcoming and seeing a way through their own addictions, whatever they may be, or those who have loved ones who are being affected by addiction and are desperately looking for more than, that they are currently being offered or have been offered. I would really encourage you, first of all, and this is not just, from my ego, but I really would like to let them know that I have written a book this last year, which is called Addiction Unplugged, How to Be Free. It's a common sense addiction discovery book, not recovery, a discovery book for all those affected by their addictions or the addictions of others. And in that book, I'm sure that your heart will sing as you read it, because it's written from my heart to the reader of everybody that picks up the book. It makes total common sense. It's got none of the lingo, none of the claptrap, none of the stuff that we've been fed for centuries that have kept us in a victim mentality. There are 4 things from that book that I would simply say to those listening tonight that I essentially think runs right across the board with everything we've touched on this evening. 4 things to remember when otherwise we might forget to remember. All right? And the first one would be, I am not, and never can I be, separated from my source. That means we're living beings. Life is lifing us. We can never be separated from that. It's so important that we know that. We must live its vibrancy. The next thing to remember, if ever we do forget to remember it, would be, I am who I say that I am. Right? That's a very, very powerful thing to know. I am whoever I say that I am. When a person goes along to Alcoholics Anonymous, the awful thing they're asked to do is announce themselves by some dreadful indictment like, I am John and I am an addict. Well, you're not. You're not. That's not who you are. Forget that. It may have been in your experience, wretched as it's been, but that is not who you are. I am who I say that I am. Make sure it's a very empowered choice when you do declare yourself in the world. The third thing to remember, should you forget to remember, is I cannot not create. We're creators. You know, the one thing the Christian faith does get very right is we're made in the image and the likeness of the Creator. Does that ring a bell? What does it mean? It means we're one and the same. Same source. No separation, no difference, no higher power outside of us. One and the same source, lacking nothing, lifing all of the time. I cannot not create. Now, we can create shit in our life, or we can create magnificence. But we cannot not create. Choose what it is that you're creating. And the last thing of all, fourth thing to remember, should you otherwise forget to remember, the meaning of life is the meaning that I give to it. Now, if you are teaching your kids at school, if you are worried about what they are learning from their teachers, the one thing that you owe your own children to is to be reminding them of that the meaning of life is the meaning that they give to it. You know, they're very empowering statements. And that's why every addict, every person suffering addiction, every person feeling that they're crippled by having lived this life of recovery from addiction, which is such a make-believe, needs to remind themselves and go free. I'd love you to read my book. I want people to get a hold of this book. I want people listening tonight to look me up on the website, beawarebealive.com. Write to me. I'll speak to you. I'll, get back to you, because it's my life. It's my message. It's a message of absolute freedom. It needs to be heard. The two of you are doing your utmost on your radio station, doing it from your own level of consciousness. Well done, the two of you. And I join you in that. And that's why I'm speaking to you both this evening.
No problem, John. Well, thanks for that. And wise words, definitely, for people tuning in and listening in. And thanks for all your links. We'd normally get all the links, but you were ahead of us there, so that's fantastic. Thanks for doing that. Is there anything else you want to add? Any other links that you want to add?
Myself, no. Just again, I might as well again remind you, because I'll say it a little more slowly if people are writing it down. You know, the book is called Addiction Unplugged, How to Be Free. Get it from any major distributor. Obvious one is Amazon, I suppose. And the website that you can, find out a little bit more about my approach to addiction and to addiction treatment and recovery particularly, would be to look at www.beawarebealive.com. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Steve.
Brilliant, John. That's fantastic. Steve, over to you, and then we'll go pop to a musical break.
Yeah, John, it's been absolutely fantastic. I feel a part two. I think you're going to have to come on again, because there's so many more avenues and that we could have went down. And
loads of stuff, yeah. We spent a lot of time on NLP, but that's fine. Okay, great.
That's okay.
That's okay. Yeah. Whatever you want to take it, I'll speak to you with pleasure.
That's okay. That's where the show goes, isn't it?
We go where the flows, and that's just the way it goes. Beawarebealive.com. Anyway, that's your website. We have posted that up on the chat rooms as well, so people can check that out. We've put up the book. And we've also put up a link to the adiashanti.org website. That's you mentioned that earlier, so we had that up there as well.
Listening to my message, you'll probably like that guy, yeah. Sure.
Brilliant stuff. John, just stay with us there for a minute, and we'll go off to music break. Thanks again for coming on. Okay, we'll go to music, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
Just having a bit of a reminisce there. Well, Alan was. He said he used to dance to that record, a little bit of ELO.
In the Scout Disco years ago.
What did you wear?
Oh, don't even go there.
Was it flares? Like, are we going back that far?
Purple trousers with blue velvet jacket.
Oh, like the ones you're wearing now.
It was the 70s after all.
I think he's still in the 70s.
It was a long time ago.
Just saying to John there, as we wrapped up on the call, so I read out some of the comments that came in during the show. Intelligent guest, great guest, class guest. Guest is very refreshing. I just passed on some of your comments to him there as well. He was delighted, and he said he would definitely up for a part two. So that's kind of good.
We'll definitely do a part 2 with John. I think there's a lot of information there, especially on the NLP side. Right, okay, so next week, that was interesting. Next week we're going to have Stan Deo. And Stan Deo, brilliant name. Stan Deo. I like that, Stan Deo. Stan Deo is an expert in so many different areas, but one of them is climate change. And he's a regular guest on John Moore's show, The Liberty Man, over in the States. We had John on a couple of years ago. So he asked Stan to come on to give us a heads up on what he thinks is going on via climate change. So fingers crossed we'll get Stan on next week and we'll have a chat with him about it. Now, the other thing that I came across today, it's funny how you're led down certain passages and one video goes to another video goes to another. And this is something called, I don't know whether people would know this, in Ireland especially, it's called the Garabandal miracle. And it's 4 girls that were in Spain in a village called Garabandal who seen the Virgin Mary, a bit like Fatima, but in 1961. And I also came across Gay Byrne from the Late Late Show interviewing one of the girls, obviously in the 60s. And I thought, wow, Gay Byrne, they actually had her on. And they were talking about things like the third secret of Fatima, about what would be happening to the world and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, this is quite interesting considering I've never heard of it. And yet this girl was on the Late Late Show. So I've emailed the people who run the Garabandal Miracle Facebook website, and I've asked if they would kindly come on and tell us about this, because, you know, it's just something that we've all heard of Fatima and the 3 secrets of Fatima, but we've never heard about this. And go to YouTube. It's Garabandal, Garabandal Miracle. Have a look on YouTube and check it out and see what you think yourself. I just found it quite interesting because we've never heard of it. So yeah, we'll see if the chap comes on, see if he can make it, we'll see if we can arrange something. And the other thing that's on the list is Paul O'Connor, who was on our show before. He was a remote viewer. He teaches remote viewing, and he's going to be hosting a basic controlled remote viewing course on the May Bank holiday weekend. So if you're interested, you can contact Paul. Unfortunately, I don't have his details. Maybe Chris, if you're online, Chris, on the chat, which he is, maybe Chris can put in his website there or his email address, and we can read it out on the show. But there you go. An incredible week this week with information coming in from all sorts and all different areas. I don't know about you.
No, I just go around with my fingers in my ears and my eyes closed.
Are you still doing your studying in the car with your audio CDs?
Yeah, absolutely. I say that's pretty much what I do. As you know, sometimes I might listen to some music just as a break, but most of the time, yeah, I'm just listening to stuff that I find on YouTube, educational stuff. Maybe not so much educational, but maybe, something from a different perspective, just to look at something a different way or hear someone else's information on a subject. And I'd often just download it, stick it on a disc, and listen to it in the car going into work, because it takes me an hour or two, and an hour from work. So I've got 2 hours a day, and that's what, over 5 days. That's 20 hours a week. I mean, that's like a college. I'm getting a college education. That's what I'm getting from the comfort of my own car. So I mean, stuff like that. But I mean, it's the way to go. I mean, look, I know so many people who just listen to mainstream radio, and it's just the same thing, the same, all the time, the same music with the same hidden messages, the same agenda, and the same news broadcast. I mean, if you wanted the definition of NLP, there's my definition of NLP: mainstream radio stations.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't, like you, Steve. I don't listen to the radio. The radio's not on in my car, and I don't watch RTE or any of the news, anything like that. I don't watch it. I just switch it off, and I feel better for it. And in the car, it's just quiet, and I'm just let to, I can think about things and have it nice and quiet and a bit of peace, no. Yeah. So I find that quite interesting.
Occasionally you drift off asleep, don't you?
Oh, we don't want to do that. That's where you need Night Rider. Free Willy on the People's Internet Radio. Thanks, Free Willy. Polis Intelligence is Paul's website. So if you Google Polis Intelligence. I'm sure you'll be able to find it and find more information out there about Paul. Now, just keep an eye also on this thing that's going on in America. About Jihad Helm. Jihad, it's an exercise. Apparently it's a pretend invasion exercise, but it looks very real. Remember, they were in 9/7/7 in London. They were doing a mock terror attack, and all of a sudden it became real. Now, wouldn't it be just funny if this Jihad Helm exercise actually went real when they were doing the pretend invasion? So it's JADEHELM. So if you go to YouTube and type that in, you'll actually see a lot of people talking about it. Dabu7 talks about it. Lisa Haven talks about it. AMTV talk about it. There's a number of YouTubers out there talking about it and letting you know what's going on. So check it out. I do believe there's an awful lot of things going on that we're not hearing about Russia and the Ukraine and everything else. Missiles being, inverted commas, test fired, and aircrafts being shot down or attacked. And also, Steve mentioned there earlier in the show, at the start of the show, about this German Wings flight and CERN, the powering up of CERN as well. So there seems to be just an awful lot going on. So, keep your eyes on the skies and your eyes on YouTube or on the internet. And if there's any information that is of interest, by all means, send it over to us and let us know. And obviously we'll, if it's worth a mention, obviously we'll give it a mention on the show. That's the plan of attack. We get it out there. But there you go. What have you planned for the week, Steve? Any news?
I'm flying off to Barbados.
Barbados.
Yeah. As soon as I leave here this evening, I'm heading straight to the airport.
Right. Okay. Is that your slush fund?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I'm joining a couple of local politicians over there. In fact, they're bringing me over.
Did I say last week about the head gasket in my car being blown?
You did, yeah.
I'm glad to say very quickly that the head gasket hadn't blown. It was just an oil sensor. And so that was great. It only cost me €40 to fix, which is great, because I was really concerned.
That was a bit of good news.
That was a bit of good news. I mean, karma was on my side because I thought it was the head gasket. Yeah. And anybody knows. So
Cara must be a mechanic. A Cara mechanic.
Okay, it's getting like that. We're gonna have to wind things down. Okay, well listen, very quickly again, if you have any T-shirts or stickers, or even print out the logo of OYM and send it in to us in any kind of, even if you're standing beside the police car and you put the sticker beside it or the logo or something like that, just something funny as well, send it in to us. We put it up on the picture gallery. Again, as usual, thanks a lot for all your links. We mightn't talk about all your links, but we definitely look at them and see, and if they're, if we feel that we can fit it in, then what we do is we stick it in on the list. So thanks again for tuning in. It's myself, Alan James. Take it easy, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, and for myself, Stephen George, we'll do it all again in 7 days' time. Stay tuned if you're listening on the People's Internet Radio stream for Vin. Not too sure who's on with Vin this evening, but it's always educational. Just listen to the man himself. He's always got something new and exciting. And if you're in the Lucan area on Monday and you have nothing to do, tune in to 96.4 FM. That's liffeysoundfm.ie. Well, it's liffeysoundfm.ie is the website. But if you're in Lucan, 96.4, 9 to 10 p.m. tomorrow night, Mick, as he often frequents our chat room here, Mick will be on discussing all things, well, pretty much similar things that we discuss here. So, until next week, we'll do it all again in 7 days. Take care. Good night. Bye-bye.